everyone wants to go to Delilah's. I love it. It's great. We go, but you got to come here. It's so much more fun. It's
Dude,
free.
I had no idea Delilah's was a Bills bar. I had no idea it was a Bills bar. I went there. I just happened to be there on New Year's Eve. That's the first time they've made the playoffs in like 15 years. The place was fucking insane. It was incredible. Like, I went in there to drink a whole bunch of Cool Willets, and I ended up doing like 8 shots of Fireball instead. And it was perfect.
Today's episode is made possible by loyal listeners like you supported through Patreon. Make a pledge today to keep this show going at patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. Hey everyone, hope you're ready for another episode of Bourbon Pursuit. And we're a little bit light on the news this week, but there's a few things that we want to kind of touch over. If anybody remembers episode 120, we talked about high volume retailers, and Ace Spirits was on the show. Louis Dacus is the owner of it. It was a few months ago. He actually was coming out here to the Four Roses barrel pick, called me up. He said, hey, I'm going to be out there. Let's go choose a barrel together. I said, sure, I got some time. Let's go ahead and do it. We go out there. We usually have about 7 or 8 barrels that are available. And since he was coming in from Minnesota, Mandy said, I think I might have something extra in the back for you. And so she rolls out this barrel, and we looked at each other, and I said to Louis, I said, you'd be dumb to not take this. And of course he took it. And this past week, it was finally released. It was a 13.5-year OESO, and it sold out in a matter of about 3 to 4 hours. So pretty cool that Ace Spirits up in Minnesota was able to sell out a barrel that quickly. So congratulations. It's a delicious barrel. And for anybody that gets a bottle of it, you know that I had a part help picking it as well. So pretty fun to be able to do that. Jim Murray has announced that 2017 William Llewellyn was his whiskey of the year. However, 2018 is right around the corner. So just get ready for BTAC Frenzy if it's ever not a frenzy. I also got my copy of Bourbon Justice this week. If you're not familiar, which you should be because you listen to the Bourbon Pursuit, you subscribe, and you know about Brian on the roundtables. He's our resident lawyer, and he just published his book talking about the history of bourbon through lawsuits. It's fascinating. He's been a guest on the show multiple times, even one show dedicated to him talking about lawsuits. So make sure you go to Amazon and check out Bourbon Justice. Have you subscribed to Bourbon Plus yet either? I've gone ahead and done it, and you should too. 4 magazines, 1 per quarter, $30 is all it takes, and it's just going to show up a lot of great information from a lot of notable writers, and of course, our co-host Fred Minnick is the editor-in-chief. Now for us, it's finally time to take about a month and a half off from barrel selections, and we've had a hell of a run. This year in 2018, we're going to do 16 single barrels from all sorts of distilleries, and the list of our barrel picks are now up to date on the Patreon page, so you can go and you can check it out. It's easy to decipher. If the boxes are green, then that means it's over. If the boxes are white, then that means the bottles haven't made it yet, so there's plenty of time to join. And if you look, there's a lot of white on there, so make sure you go and you check it out and go join Patreon to get your access to these barrel picks. And Keg and Bottle is the one that is making this happen. So make sure you go and support Tony over at Keg and Bottle, KEG, the letter N, bottle.com. And you can shop over 700 different whiskeys online and have them shipped right to your door. Now, the Kentucky Derby and Legends Museum, as I've said before, those tickets are on sale. You've got Michter's, you've got Craft Night, and you've got Kentucky Owl. These begin in January. Go buy your tickets at derbymuseum.org/legend series and watch Fred Minnick be the MC up here and get to ask some of the hard questions. Now, this episode is kind of like a coming-to-age tale for a lot of us. We start off drinking a lot of regular items that we see on the shelf, and then you catch an itch to go for a limited release, and then you start sort of trading your way up the ladder. And after a while, you begin to know what you like, and you figure out what you have access to, and more importantly, maybe you figure out what you don't have access to, and now you can start trading and rounding out your bunker. So this is really going to be one of those for the people that have really been in this for a little while or maybe getting into it, and you kind of want to know exactly how do I get my hands on some of those epic bottles that a lot of people might have out there. So it's going to be fun. Now, do you subscribe to our YouTube channel? Now, not only are the video podcast posted there, but you'll be notified every time we go live for a Bourbon Community Roundtable recording. So make sure you go and do that and join in on the fun. And if you haven't left a review yet, please do. We're going to get out to 10,000 of you that listen to this particular episode when it's released. So just take a few minutes. Write us a review. Help us grow. We really appreciate it when you're able to do that. Now, enjoy this week's episode. And here's Fred Minnick with Above the Char.
I'm Fred Minnick, and this is Above the Char. This past week, I reached out to our Patreon subscribers and asked a simple question. What is a bourbon asshole? Listener Rob McCarthy had this to say. There are two types of bourbon assholes. One buys up every hard-to-get bottle and then sells it for a profit. The second type is when people ask questions on Facebook groups. The assholes are the ones who are condescending, insulting for reasons I do not know. Some bourbon drinkers think just because they've been drinking it longer, they have a superiority complex. Like Rob, most people find bourbon assholes live online, where you can live anonymously and not face consequences. Well, until you do. But listener Scott Perlman actually sees bourbon assholes in public too. Scott wrote a bourbon asshole is someone who interrupts you looking at bourbon in a liquor store with, "Want to know which one is best?" I chuckled at that one because I've been that asshole before. I love spreading gospel, and I've encouraged others to educate in the right circles as well. However, there's a fine line between educating somebody and judging them for what they want to drink. There's also this weird phenomenon happening in human nature. Social media brings out the worst in us. Just follow politics and you'll see mothers and daughters bickering and brothers bringing up embarrassing pasts just to win an argument. It taps into our desire to call out flaws and puts a magnifying glass on things we really don't care about. For example, a few years ago, a Facebook friend of mine wrote a 4-paragraph rant about standing behind an old lady at a grocery checkout line. The elderly woman was writing a check, and my friend, a highly educated and typically nice person, mind you, was tired of looking at Almond Joys in the checkout magazine rack of who's cheating on whom. So she did what all people do on social media. She bitched about it. Who writes checks anymore, she wrote. But really, how much did she truly care? I don't think she is prejudiced against check writers. She just felt the need to complain about something on social media, and that's common. Are most bourbon assholes really just like my friend in the checkout line? They have no real qualm with what somebody is drinking or care how much the other person knows. But the inner workings of modern society has conditioned us to talk shit even if you don't care. Then there's the buy everything guy who sells bottles on Facebook. Soon, when bourbon fades, he or she will move on to something else, be it designer handbags or used silky celebrity underwear. To me, these people are the epitome of a bourbon asshole because they don't care about bourbon. They just care about themselves. And that's this week's Above the Char. Do you live in Oklahoma? Come see me October 20th at the Oklahoma Book Festival, where I'll talk about my latest books in my home state. Go Pokes. If you have an idea for Above the Char, hit me up on Twitter or Instagram at Fred Minnick. That's at Fred Minnick. Until next week, cheers.
Welcome back to the episode of the Bourbon Pursuit Podcast, the official podcast of bourbon, the number one podcast of bourbon. Tonight is going to be, today, whatever time you're listening to this, it's going to be an interesting episode because we're going to be talking about something that is pretty much when you start collecting or when you start getting into bourbon, you start finding people that are out on forums and you kind of get an idea of how big their bar is. I remember when I started getting into it, I posted on Facebook on the Bourbon Pursuit Facebook page before of my bar. And I think when I first started, I had like 10 bottles and I was like, all right, like everybody come over and drink. And then you start looking around and you see what other people have and you realize, oh, that's nothing compared to other people that are out there. And I've had the opportunity to meet our guest tonight through various means of bourbon and whiskey. And I think tonight is going to be an interesting way on how we all have began to grow our collections beyond a way that we could say that I think we all have enough bourbon in our collections now that we could have one drink for the rest of our lives and still not run out of bottles. And so I think it's going to be an interesting way that we look at not only how we get into collecting, how we find it enjoyable, how you find people in the community to find it enjoyable, and as well as how do you start getting those awesome unicorn bottles that you necessarily don't get to find anymore. Basically, how do you transform your bunker from something that is just everyday off the shelf items into almost a destination for all your buddies to come over and start drinking all your bourbon. I guess that's a good way to put it. So tonight we have two people that if you are around Facebook at all and around some of the forums, you might have seen their names. We've got Aaron Stine and Michael St. Pierre, or better known as MSP. So fellas, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Cheers.
Thanks for having us.
Good deal. So this was an idea that actually all started because Michael and I have been talking on Facebook, and he says, I want to come on the show and talk about something. I said, all right, well, let's figure out some ideas. And he started throwing some out, and this one was a good one because, Michael's, if you know of MSP, some of the funny things that he puts on some of the forums too. And I figured that he's going to be a good person to kind of talk about this subject. But before we really get into it, I kind of want to look at you all and get an idea of your backgrounds. How did you really get into whiskey? Was there a first bottle? Was there a friend that got you into it? Kind of what was your journey into getting into it? So Michael, we'll start with you.
All right. Well, it all, believe it or not, and I bet you a lot of people started here. I remember this was probably a good 8-9 years ago. I think I bought my first bottle of bourbon, and it was a bottle of Woodford Reserve. I remember sitting there on the couch. I think I dabbled with ice a little bit, and then I was like, oh, let me just try it without ice, and I poured a little glass of it, and I, this is coming from my old days, my Red Bull vodka clubbing days. So this is a big change up for me. So, I remember pouring a little bit into a glass, and just after, maybe 3 or 4 sips, I was just kind of sitting there on the couch watching golf, I believe. I think I was watching the Masters, actually. And I was just like, wow, like, holy crap. Like, this is pretty enjoyable. Like, just a few sips in, you're kind of feeling all right. It's not something you have to go mixing with this, that, and the other thing. And then I just kind of started there. And from there, I think I remember starting to do a little research and like, ooh, what other bourbons are out there? And I'd go to the store and buy, 2 or 3 like baseline starter whiskeys. I think I started with Woodford Reserve, maybe Elijah Craig. And then, like as you keep doing that over time, you just start going in that rabbit hole and seeing, oh, wow, there's rarer ones. There's ones over here. Luckily, all this started out early enough before all this crazy, like how whiskey is now. It's insane. Everyone, you feel like everywhere you go, someone's talking about it. But that's basically how it started out with me. Just a normal old bottle of Woodford Reserve. I just loved it, and then started searching more. And boy, it's a never-ending rabbit hole. Still searching today.
For that first bottle of Woodford, were you just really like just walking down the aisle and you said, I'm just going to try something different? Because you said this was your Red Bull vodka clubbing days.
Yeah. Like seriously, like the crap I used to drink was unbelievable. And once in a great while, I'll still venture out there just to kill myself the next morning,
It's the Las Vegas special, man. It's what keeps you raging through the night, right? There is a time and a place for it still.
It really was, man. It was like I thought it was just like a super nice looking bottle. It like kind of drew me in, the classic Woodford Reserve. Like, I just thought it was a really high end whiskey at the time. And I just splurged for it. I think it was what is it? 30 or $40?
Mm-hmm. Somewhere around there.
That was a lot of money back for me on a bottle of alcohol, So
absolutely.
That's how I started.
Aaron, what about yourself?
Yeah. So, I've always been a collector of things, baseball cards, etc. I never imagined whiskey would turn into that. we would go out and party all through our 20s and early 30s and drink Beam and Coke, and then it became Beam and water, and then it was Beam, and eventually it was Beam with no ice, and you're like, probably some real good whiskey out there, and you kind of venture off. I remember I had a really good friend who was into whiskey, and he introduced me to Eagle Rare 10-year, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is what good whiskey is. Now that sparked it for me, was Eagle Rare. Now I have a big Eagle Rare collection because of that. But I remember at that point after that, I'd start to go to like my Binnies and just kind of, you'd buy by what you saw, right? If it looked cool, the packaging was cool, you'd buy that, or you'd ask, and or you'd go to the high-end room once in a blue moon and splurge a little and buy something. And years later you look back and you go, none of it was all that good. But it was interesting. It was fun. And, one day I was playing around, I remember really well, on a Saturday morning, and I read this article about a Willet. And it was a old wax top, like 4 or 5 year rye. And I Googled, where can I find it in Chicago? And I found a small liquor store here that I'd never heard of. And they had it. And I went there. I started talking to the guy who was stocking the shelves there. And it turned out he was the owner of the store. And we started talking. Next thing I know, 2 hours go by, and he sells me an old Rip 10-year. And I walk out giddy as can be, thrilled, right? Like, never thought I'd get Pappy in my life. Here I was with a 10-year thinking it was the greatest thing ever, calling my dad, how cool is this? And I started going back to that store every single weekend. And for years, I was there every week, every 2 weeks. And he taught me everything about whiskey. And he got me really hooked on good whiskey. And then, of course, from there, you find the community and you really get hooked. And, as MSP said, you go down the rabbit hole. And next thing you know, you're trying to find everything you can. So that's kind of how it got started for me.
About how long ago was this for you? Like when you finally, like, you had that first bottle of Eagle Rare that kind of like flipped the switch for you?
Yeah, it was probably 7-8 years ago. Yeah, it's been a little while now. So it doesn't go back as far as some of these guys do, but it's been a little while now, enough to amass more whiskey than I can drink in a lifetime.
Yeah. It's amazing what you can do in 7 to 8 years.
Oh, my God.
So another question to kind of throw at you there, Aaron, and we'll go to MSP next after this, is what was that? What is the itch to really start getting high end stuff? You had read an article about wax top Willet. I can tell you from me personally, I had been drinking bourbon, just regularly since through college. So we're talking 2002 up until today, and I didn't really know high end liquor, high end whiskeys, and limited editions even existed until like 2011, 2013 timeframe. So what was your kind of, was it that store that kind of gave you that education process of being able to find that there are other things that are out there?
Yeah, it absolutely was. So this store is Warehouse Liquors here in Chicago, and the guy who owns it is a guy named Gene, and he picks a ton of barrels every year. And I'd go in and I'd drink samples with him blind, and he'd start to teach me about what I'm tasting and the profiles and what it is, beyond just sort of like the experience of it. And it became very sort of intellectual. And then you start to go off and read articles, and I'd walk in and I'd be like, oh, I read about this Eagle Rare 17-year. Like, do you have any of those? And he'd sell me one, and I think it was the coolest thing ever. And this was like 2013 at that point. I remember that first Eagle Rare I got from him. I remember going in and asking about like Old Forester birthday bourbons. It just looked so cool. And I read this article about it, and he gave me one of those. And, it started really opening my eyes so much, because there's all these different profiles and so many cool things you can drink. And then you've got this guy who's sort of teaching you about what it is you're experiencing. And you put all that together, and next thing you know, you're just chasing everything. And so from there, it just became a complete and utter addiction, right? I mean, it was like you read about things. It was the newest releases in the fall. And then before you knew it, every calendar year, there was so much coming out, and you were just chasing it all. And then, eventually I ran off, started making friends with other liquor store owners, and started to get to know a lot of people. And I'm getting a lot of bottles, right? And this was when you could still get this stuff. And I remember at the time people talking about how, I remember when Pappy was on the shelf. And now I look back and I go, I remember when I could get Pappy. Not that I really cared to drink it that much, but it's good currency, right? So, yeah, I mean, it was an evolution for sure. And he was a huge part of it, just really helping me understand what I was experiencing and opening me up to so many things that I wouldn't have had access to otherwise.
I don't think you realized it, that he basically Miyagi'd you, right?
Totally.
Like you were Danielson all the way. You don't even realize it, right?
Yeah, I refer to him as like my whiskey mentor. I mean, he was an it. He taught me so much. And look, I was buying a lot of his single barrels, and it was a good thing for both of us. But without him, I never would have learned what I did, and it was awesome. So it really set me on this path.
Yeah. What about you, MSP? When did that itch start to hit you to start finding other like higher end things?
I think it actually all started one time, and this guy became one of my best friends. I got a random phone call from a guy in Raleigh, and this was he's a great friend of mine. He was actually here this weekend. We had a blast. He just went home back to Raleigh this morning, but he gave me a call. I guess what he was doing is back in the day, he was on the phone. He was calling all these liquor stores out of state. He's, researching online, and some liquor store owner at some store gave him my number. They're like, yeah, this guy's been coming around Charleston looking for all these weird things. And I think he has one of those Van Winkle decanters, and that perked his ears up. And I don't know why the store owner would ever say that, because I didn't have one at the time. And sure enough, this guy calls me. He's like, hey, man, this is kind of a weird phone call, but I got your number through another store, and they said you're collecting whiskey and just kind of want to shoot the shit with you and see what you have. And we just kind of talked for a while, and he's kind of been my Yoda, so to say. And he's kind of the one who's pulled me in the direction of certain, whiskeys of and of course it all started with the Van Winkles back in 2010, 2011, back when it was Stitzel-Weller. And, I remember buying those on the shelf and going around, and they were just plentiful here. I just went absolutely crazy. I was pulling out new credit cards. I was just, it was insane, man. Like I remember popping my trunk open, and I'd have like 60 bottles of Van Winkle. And then, as the years go on, that diminishes and diminishes. Now I'm lucky if I see one. I mean, I still figure out a way to get some, but yeah, like that has kind of been my thing. He's pointed me in the direction of like certain whiskeys, and like, and we all know, like we all talk about limited releases, but like the older whiskeys, none of those were limited releases. They were just good back then, and they just sat on the shelf for years and years and years until someone on one of the Facebook pages was like, hey, has anyone ever tried this? This is delicious. And then across the country, everyone just goes out and cleans all the old stores out of this, Old Granddad's a perfect example of that. If you talk about Old Granddad with like people that are 60 and 70 years old, they'll sit there and be like, holy shit, I remember drinking that back when I was 20. It's hard to choke that stuff down. Now we're sitting here drinking it like it's liquid gold.
That's very true.
It's funny.
So I guess also to kind of baseline this, if you feel comfortable, like giving people an idea of what your collection is like, because I know that at least for mine, people get to see it all the time. Sometimes I do backdrops on Instagram of my bourbon collection. So what's the kind of bottle count that you're looking at right now, just so people have an idea of how legit you really are?
Man, it's nothing compared to a couple of those guys out there, but I'd say I have probably about 300 open and probably 1,200 sealed.
Yeah.
And I kind of go
like
through the rotation.
Sometimes.
Yeah, well, I might be overdoing it actually there. Let's I'd say 250 and 1,000. That's more like it.
There you go.
But a lot of things I have open are just I've definitely done my share of opening stupid expensive bottles where I'm kind of running out of that, not running out of the whiskey, but just kind of not as inclined to open every bottle I get immediately like I used to. I remember I would go around and buy all these crazy expensive bottles, these limited releases. I'd get home and I'd pop the top right away and just, have some friends over and pour away. And when you start running those numbers up in your head now, especially with what the value of some of those are worth today, you're just like, wow, that's insane.
What about you, Aaron? Because you've got somewhere north of like every bottle of Willet that's ever been released or something like that.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, probably about 1,000 bottles at this point. I was kind of doing the math because I figured you'd ask me that. And I do think about it every once in a while. I built this cabinet and I kind of know how many it holds. And then I bought this new place with a whiskey room in it and kind of put shelves up and know how much they hold. It's probably about 1,000. And there's probably 150 open bottles. There's a lot of open whiskey. At some point it gets to be like, I can't keep opening things. I can't drink them fast enough. People don't come visit as often as I'd like, but I wish they would. So come visit because you can drink anything I've got.
I'm going to take you up on that.
Yeah, I think we both will.
So ultimately, but yeah, there's a lot.
So let's kind of talk about the transformation of the bunkers and how you kind of amass those things, right? Because MSP's probably got almost anything underneath the sun when it comes to Stitzel Weller and those crazy things. I know Aaron's got a lot of stuff that is related to Willett family estate. So kind of talk about what you all do and how you sort of amass these things to the point that you have them today, and kind of talk about the history, because there was a time when there was actually a thing called hunting and you could go to stores and buy stuff or find a store that's off the beaten path. So kind of talk about the growing pains that you've kind of had up until today as well.
So I was lucky enough to really dive headfirst into whiskey before the huge whiskey hype. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was still getting pretty popular, but I was able to go around and learn quite a bit about whiskey, which ones to pick up, which ones to leave on the shelf, kind of look for different UPC codes. When I go back and think about how I learned all this stuff, it's pretty amazing. Like it's pretty wild stuff. All the knowledge we've gained over the whiskey. I mean, how nerdy are we? We know barcodes on the back of some of these bottles. Like, oh no, you don't leave that one. That one's not 86259. That's the one you buy right there. It's the same exact looking bottle, but we know a couple numbers different on the back of the bottle. But that's basically what. I was lucky enough to just get into it early enough, not nearly as early as some of these guys. Some of these guys, oh my God, I really have a high respect for those guys that were buying barrels of awesome whiskey when no one gave a shit about bourbon. So those guys, back in the Reed days and, all those, the Doug Green ink, all those epic Willets that are going for what, $15,000 a bottle now? Well, he couldn't give those bottles away back then. I mean, that's just amazing. But basically what transformed my bunker is I had the luxury of going around town and every state that I traveled to and trying to pick up Van Winkle bottlings. And that is basically what was the ground floor of my bunker, because everyone wanted Van Winkle. So I would go around and buy these 60, 70 bottles of Van Winkle in a season. And, I'd have friends come over and they'd bring over like cool whiskeys and they'd be like, hey man, I would love to try a Van Winkle. And I'm like, oh really? Well, I'd love to try one of these, and that's basically, I did a lot of local trading and just searching for bottles that I really wanted using my Van Winkle bottles that I bought. And most of them were at retail. Sometimes I'd pay more than retail, but that was fine because we all know the value of Van Winkle goes absolutely through the roof. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean it kind of hasn't stopped, with its prices. It's kind of leveled out a little bit now after the fall hit, but you always see what happens next fall and it'll be $100 more per bottle for some odd reason. So I mean, do you kind of see as Van Winkles as your kind of I guess you can say your ace in your pocket when you're trying to sit there and find something quote unquote better?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess in your opinion, does the Van Winkle, does the whiskey really not live up to hype to you, and you really think that you have a better opportunity to get some of these other bottles that you'd never see before, trading for Dusties that you'd rather have just by getting rid of those?
Yeah. So, like you said, the Van Winkles are kind of like an ace in the pocket. Now, don't get me wrong; it's all great whiskey. And back in the day, when we were able to go get all these were still coming out of this. These were bottled as Stitzel-Weller juice, which is right up my alley. So those are what bottles I'd never let go of, and I never will. Those are all drinkers to me because that's my favorite distillery ever. It's shut down long ago, and no one can seem to duplicate it. But what was the second part of that question?
Yeah, I mean, do you really at this point you basically said that the new stuff coming out isn't really worth its weight in dollar,
okay,
right?
Yeah.
And if you have the opportunity, I mean, like pretty much from now on, from let's say our last bottling was 2011, because that's just a good roundabout number. Let's not get into the actual details of what it actually was, because we could spend hours reading on forums and opinions.
Yeah.
But I mean, pretty much from now on, every single new bottling and every single year of vintage that comes out, do you kind of look at it as saying, like, maybe I'll open one, but I'm getting rid of all these in favor of something else?
Yeah, it's like basically it's almost like I've gone through, opening the entire vertical, the whole lineup from 10 to 23. I mean, we've all probably done it. I know I've seen on your shelf you've got every Van Winkle open as we speak. Now, when you go and finally finish those, do you think you're going to open up another vertical of them? Probably not. You see, you kind of enjoy the Van Winkles. I've been there, done that. It's kind of plentiful now. You kind of see them all over the place. It's great whiskey. I'm not hating on it whatsoever. Are there things that I enjoy a lot more? Absolutely, for sure. Like Aaron, he's obsessed with Willett Family Estate. I completely agree. I mean, some of those, I don't have as nearly as many as him, but I've got some cool ones that I love, and I would take those over a Van Winkle any day.
I mean, I guess for me, the whole thing about keeping Van Winkles on the shelf is because you have that lure of people that aren't necessarily you two, but other people that come over and they're like, I got to try Van Winkle, or like, here you go, man. Like, I can have at it, right? Like, it's not a big deal. And I guess that's one thing that you find out over a period of time, is that these aren't necessarily unicorns, right? Is that these are just, and Michael, you might have said it best. I mean, they're huge releases. These are bottles that are in the tens of thousands of releases every single fall, right?
Right. There's a lot of hype behind these bottles, and people don't realize that. They think because of a couple magazine articles that Van Winkle whiskeys, and it's funny how we're even spending so much time talking about Van Winkle, just because, that's just all part of it, But it's amazing that what people think of these Van Winkle bottlings. It's like, guys, let me pour you 4 blind tastings, and you tell me what you like the best. Don't go off what everyone else is saying, because it's absolutely not true.
So, Aaron, I kind of want to get your idea of how your bunker transformed. Were you following the line of MSP, or were you just opening up multiple credit cards with multiple PayPal accounts and trying to go into credit card debt and pay all this stuff off?
No. I think I was maybe a tad behind him and living in a city where, unfortunately, there were a lot of people searching for this stuff. So the first few years, you could get a lot of Van Winkles, you could get a lot of BTAC, and you'd open them and drink them, and you'd have a lot of currency at the same time. And you'd put them away. And then, I'm a big believer that the palate does change over time, and I would try new things and love those. And then I'd go down that rabbit hole for a while. I remember trying Willett and just absolutely loved it. I don't remember what the first Willett bourbon I had was. Doesn't really matter because it was awesome. That was when I really discovered I loved high proof whiskey too. Again, going back to my guy here, he's a high proof whiskey guy, and he gave me Elijah Craig barrel proofs early on and things like that were hot, but they were really, there was a depth of flavor there that was so fascinating to me. And so the Willets hit me perfectly when I first tried them. And then it was just like, I would just buy every willet I could find, right? I was very indiscriminate about it. It didn't matter. I didn't know enough. There weren't tons of people that knew enough about this stuff to tell you this barreling is great. This one, isn't maybe as good. So I just buy them all. And that was a point where it felt expensive, but frankly, in comparison to now, it's like it was nothing. And then I remember, discovering Smooth Ambler, and again at the local liquor store, and I saw the label, and it wasn't appealing to me, but we tried it blind, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. And that was when they were like in the hundreds, right? Back in the early Smooth Ambler releases, and I really fell in love with Smooth Ambler, and I started buying all those and collecting those, and then you get into Four Roses, and then that happens, and they're just all so different and so fascinating. And so for guys like us, I just think it's so interesting to our palates to try all these different things. The next thing you know, you want everything, right? You want all of these and all of those. And next thing you have so many. And, 5, 6, 7 years go by, and some of the stuff becomes currency, for better or for worse. And at times it's for worse because there's bottles I want to drink, but if you spend $500 on a bottle and it's worth $3,000, $4,000 now, it's very hard to open that. I don't have the kind of funds that allow me to do that on a regular basis. So some of that becomes currency. And those who know me know that, occasionally I'll let some of those go because a $4,000 bottle, I can buy a lot of other bottles with that. And at the end of the day, I am a drinker and I want a lot of other bottles. So it's a conundrum kind of, right? I mean, it's like a good one. You can't complain about that. But a lot of it did evolve into currency. For me, I'm not a Van Winkle guy. Honestly, I love the old Van Winkle Rye. I always rave about the F. I think it's one of the best values there is. I will drink all of my Van Winkle Ryes. But the other Van Winkles for me, the old Stitzel or the 20 years I liked, everything else, it's not my thing. And so I was lucky enough to have a lot of the 15s and the 10s and 12s, and I don't care about them. And so you can trade those, and a lot of people are really happy with those, and you get stuff you're happy with. And next thing you know, it evolves. And then I remember a point that came along when I discovered, Pre-Fire Heaven Hill. And I was like, oh my God, what is this? Like now I'm really hooked on a whole new, rabbit hole I got to go down. And
now you're buying plastic bottles of JW Dant, right?
Oh my God.
Yep.
It's insanity, right? But it's so good. And so then you discover some of the Willets that are Pre-Fire Heaven Hill, and then the Weeders. There's so much variety, right? And for those of us who love that, we just end up just taking it all in. And so, yeah, I mean, over time, now when I let stuff go, it's to replace it with other stuff. This is not for me a profit thing. I don't care if it is for some. It's just for me, I'm a drinker. And so when I sell stuff, it's because I can't wait to go and buy the next thing. And at some point you run out of money and you got more whiskey than you do money. So you use that instead.
And I think Aaron said something key here is he said, your palate changes. So there were things that I remember really going crazy after, 5, 6 years ago. I remember trying to get as many as I could, this, that, and the other thing. And now I have these things still sitting on my shelf, and I just have kind of lost interest in them. It's not, maybe that I drank them and I went through a bottle and I was like, oh, okay, that wasn't as good as I remember it being. Or you just kind of lose interest in the bottle itself. Some bottles I remember I used to collect just for like the coolness of the bottle itself. Just, oh wow, that's a really unique, weird one-off. I like that. I've never seen one of those. Let me go try and get as many of these as I possibly can. And now 5 years go by and you've had Michter's 20 a couple times and you're like, holy crap, now I really like that. I like that a lot more than I liked this. So it's a never-ending cycle. And even for me now is I am slowly transitioning from bourbon to single malt scotches and Japanese whiskeys, and now Irish is really getting crazy. I'm really starting to really enjoy some Irish whiskey, but and there's times where I go to my cabinet and I'm just like, yeah, I'm just not really in the mood for bourbon at all. Like I'll go through months at a time where I'm just hitting single malts. Like it's crazy, but it really does go in waves and phases, and it always comes back. So as much as I don't want to go have a bourbon right now, like I know in a couple months I'll be back on the bourbon craze. It's really weird how your palate and just evolves and goes back and forth. And then you'll go through your little beer phase and not want to drink any whiskey at all. Like it's crazy.
Well, when we're ready to spin off single malt pursuit, we'll let you go ahead and lead that one.
You know what though? You said something there that I remember I would taste something and I'd feel like I got to go bunker 4 or 5 of these, right? I want these for the rest of my life. And now I'm like, I can start to let these go because what I failed to realize at the time was that they're going to keep making great whiskey. Like I don't have to hoard every bottle I like because there's going to be another one and another one and another one. And the variety of it all is way more fun than having 10 of the same bottle. So that changed too. You start to bunker those and then they become valuable and they become currency and you trade them because you're like, as much as I love this, I can go get a whole bunch of other new things. So that's part of it, I think, too.
Right.
And then on top of that are the single barrel picks that we all do. I mean, all of us are part of groups and we've all been included in having the luxury to go pick our own barrel of whiskey, which is now where I'm kind of at. I don't really have an interest in buying crazy. Well, yeah, I know you're going to give me shit about that. I still buy crazy bottles, but I'm more inclined to buying value drinkers. If you go buy a barrel of bourbon and spend $80 on really awesome whiskey, then, I'm fine with that. Totally fine with that.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was like, is there a shelf bourbon that you can even, because don't get me wrong, like you guys have had everything in between from epics to just bottom shelf plastic stuff. So, when you're sitting at home at night, is there a shelf bourbon that you even have a go-to anymore? Is it something that you kind of lost interest in? Michael, you already said yours, so because you're on the single malt train right now. But Aaron, what about you?
Did you know that according to adage.com, podcasts are able to engage listeners in a way traditional media can't? Podcasts are mobile. They can be taken anywhere a listener goes. It also becomes part of their daily routine, such as commuting, exercising, mowing grass, or perhaps just cleaning around the house. Did you also notice that you're listening to this right now? You'll never hear about a person just flipping through podcasts, so your message is heard loud and clear. It's also a permanent endorsement because it's built into the audio playback. That's a benefit not offered by any other medium. If that sounds interesting, let's talk. Send me an email, team@bourbonpursuit.com. Now, let's get back to the show.
When you're sitting at home at night, is there a shelf bourbon that you even have a go-to anymore? Is it something that you kind of lost interest in? Michael, you already said yours, so because you're on the single malt train right now. But Aaron, what about you?
Yeah, for me, it's definitely my private barrel picks. Not only have I collected just a ton of them, but I've had the luxury of participating a bunch of times too, right? And so that stuff is so much fun. So tons of Four Roses picks that are just awesome. There's so much variety there. Still love my Eagle Rare picks. But all those single barrels are so much fun because they really are different, right? And every one of them has its own uniqueness. So for me, I drink a lot of those on a regular basis. I was just in Japan for 8 days and then went through another phase, the KBD phase, where I drink all this old dusty KBD. And I've been just drinking that like crazy since I got back. Such an awesome, unique profile. When you find the really good ones in there, they are just so awesome. So, it changes constantly. But the go-tos I still think are like the Old Weller Antique picks, the Russell's Reserve picks, the Four Roses picks, the Eagle Rare picks, stuff like that.
Yeah. So I guess another question to kind of throw at you all is, so I take an idea about the guy that had a paperclip that traded for a pen, like all the way up to a yacht. Do you guys waste your time like trying to even get Elijah Craig barrel proof or Elmer T Lee and trading up, or is that stuff just pennies and just peanuts and just really not worth it to you?
For me,
go ahead.
I was to say, for me, it's not a matter of worth it or not. At some point, it becomes like how much time do you dedicate to the pursuit of stuff that just isn't that interesting anymore. And I don't really care to drive around to find something to make $5 on, right? 7-8 years ago, that was all super exciting. The other thing too is, a number of years ago, I got involved with Cost Plus Shipping Group, and Elijah Craig barrel proof that at one point I had to pay secondary for, we were shipping to each other, like at cost, right? And that changed everything for me. because I have really amazing access to things that at some point were secondary type items that aren't anymore. And so it allowed us to all just share and drink very differently. So my time has become more valuable than what it's worth. And so I don't really run around to liquor stores a whole lot anymore. I don't chase stuff a whole lot anymore. It's just too hard, you know? I mean, for what you're going to find, it's not worth the time anymore.
I totally agree. It's like the bartering of bottles is exhausting, because every time you're buying these bottles, you're going around, and this isn't 6 years ago anymore. It's not just me and Aaron running around the cities looking for bottles. It's everyone now. And, we have all had our, me probably more than anyone else, have our tuffles with store owners. They take one look at you like, oh yeah, this guy, and oh God, I don't think I'm allowed in like 5 stores here in Charleston. I just pull in the parking lot and they're already out the door, like, get the hell out of here, but it's because they say a bunch of crap that makes no sense, and if you call them out on it, then you're basically banned forever. And I've done well here in Charleston, and the days are the sweet days they're over. Let's just face it, and I accept that. That's fine. I don't care. I'm not even going to probably try to hunt Van Winkle this year, or BTAC, or anything. All these limited releases, I guess 4 grains coming out. I've already had like 15 people from Charleston like, hey man, do you know when the 4 grains going to drop? And I'm just like, no, I don't. And if I did, I probably wouldn't tell you where it's going to be.
Yeah, exactly. Well, at least my opinion with 4 grain is that if Buffalo Trace thought that making bourbon with 4 grains in the beginning was better than 3, they would have been doing it all along, right? So
exactly.
So yeah, let them go ahead and chase that for all they want. So another kind of question to kind of ask you all about in regards of how do you, whether it's chasing a bottle that you have never had access to, or trying to find your way to try different things. You guys have a lot of open bottles there, and you're very opening and welcome to share for everybody that comes over. But have Andrew Scott actually asked, have any of those open bottles turned into sample swaps where you can say, like, I'll trade you an Epic for an Epic, and then maybe you try it and you're like, all right, well, crap.
Definitely.
Now I got to go find this.
Yep.
Yeah.
It sure has. I mean, I remember trading a Michter's 20, I think 3 or 4 ounce sample for, I think it was 1 or 2 ounces of the Bourbon Society Pappy Van Winkle private pick. What was it? What was that Pappy 23 wax top private pick?
Take your word for it.
It's old. Yeah, it's old. Not Bourbon Society, but whatever it was.
Society.
Yeah, the only problem with that is there's no way I'm going to go hunt down that thing. It's just kind of a cool thing to mark off your checklist. Like, cool, I had that. I tasted it. It doesn't get to the extreme as those beer guys who have, that app where they just mark every beer they've ever sipped. It's not like that. I kind of wish I did document everything I've ever had, because we've all had those drunken nights where you look at your photos the next morning like, holy crap, we drank all these last night? Like, damn.
There was a Hirsch Blue Wax in there? I don't even remember.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes those nights, especially after some barrel proof Willets, your palate's fried. So you don't, you drank it, but you have no idea what it tastes like. So, but I think the trading of samples I think that's so fun. I think it's so cool. I'm always like open to do that with people. Like, I think that's so great. That's really cool stuff.
Yeah, totally agree. That's such an awesome way to try things that you wouldn't get to otherwise. And, I think when we were doing this a long time ago, people were so willing to share stuff that was very expensive or rare anyway, and it's become very expensive, and you get to try amazing stuff. And then it evolved for me. I travel for work every week, and I've met so many people that everywhere I go, I get to spend time with people from the community, and people share bottles, and you come to parties with things, and you bring things. And I remember that's what happened to me with Michter's 20 just a couple years ago. I always kind of poo-pooed it, and I tried it at this party, and I was like, oh my God, it's amazing. And I came back and I had to buy a couple, right, because it was that good. The craziest thing is, if you ever go to Japan, like that's when things really get out of control, because there you can try all this stuff that here is $5,000 and $6,000 and $7,000 a bottle for like $20 a pour there. And so we actually did. We went and we chronicled every pour, because I think back too, and I'm like, man, I wish I would have taken notes years ago on things, because people ask me, I'm like, I don't really remember a lot of it. A lot of things stand out, right? But you don't remember everything. But when you go to Japan, you can try everything under the sun. So all the old Stitzelweller stuff, all the KBD stuff, all the Willets. And now you start to really figure out the stuff that's expensive that you really love. And if you're inclined to trade for something really expensive or buy something, at least you've tried it, I know I came back and like my favorite thing I tried was an old Rip 15-year squat from Lawrenceburg. And I thought it was like the greatest thing I'd ever had. And I'm like, I got to have that. It's crazy expensive, but you don't buy a lot for your bunker, right? And you sell something that you maybe had a few bucks in and kind of swap that out. But yeah, I mean, trying stuff, whether it's sample swaps or, going to Japan or the parties we all attend together, that's the awesome part of all this. And yeah, at this point, I feel like I've had the benefit and luxury of trying so much amazing whiskey that I have a pretty good feel for what is to me just crazy overrated and what I really enjoy. So
yeah. And it's not only just like trying great whiskey, like you said, like it's opened so many doors of like the hospitality people open up to you. It's just like incredible. I mean, look, we've all met each other before. I mean, in Kentucky, I know me and Kenny have hung out a few times. Like it's just always a good time, and people are always so welcoming. I mean, this shit's gotten me on TV a couple times. That's some pretty wild stuff. You go anywhere you go, and whiskey people have a similar taste. If you like good whiskey, then you're most likely going to like good beer and good food. So no matter where you go, you're never going to get steered the wrong way when it comes to those three things. You're always eating like a king in the whiskey world. You're always getting the best recommendations of where to go, where not to go. And anywhere we go in the country, probably in the world, honestly, we are already like 3 steps ahead of most people. We're going to skip right over all the tourist traps. We're going to go to the real deal where you want to be. And that all comes from whiskey, in my opinion.
Well, I think Aaron just sold out every flight to Tokyo for the next 6 months. So.
Yeah, I know. I was just going to say, well, it's not going to be there anymore.
But you know what? People should go and enjoy it, because it's going to be gone at some point anyway. So hopefully the people that I know that would really appreciate it will go. I've got a buddy there right now, another couple of weeks. And when I went, I had amazing people that helped me out, on my trip, and I hope to do the same. But yeah, there's just so much great stuff out there to try.
It's got to be getting close to being diminished, though. It's got to be. I mean, it's got to be.
I mean, if you look at, put it this way, old bottles are starting to pop up here in Kentucky like you'd never seen. Like all of a sudden, people's basements just started getting unloaded. And now all these, restaurants start having them. However, they are not value pours by any stretch of the means, right? Like none of us are actually going to go to any of these restaurants and actually buy a pour. Like, we're not shelling out $70 for a half ounce of old Weller antique from the 70s. Like at some point we will run into somebody we know and it'll be open on their bar and we'll try it. Right.
That's exactly right. That's the other thing that some of these old bottles that we stashed away years ago help with, right? Because if you do have something amazing that people want to try and you want to share with them, you don't have that much in it. It doesn't kill you to open that, right? And then other people get to try these amazing things. I just did that with a buddy, this old Willet that I've had for a long time. I didn't know what we were going to do with, and I took it down. I'm like, you got every Willet under the sun, but I got one you don't have, and we can share that together. And it was awesome, and that's the fun of it. So yeah, it's a virtuous cycle for sure.
Did that person happen to be in Georgia?
No, he was in Kentucky, actually.
Okay. All right.
So there's a question that came out from Catch 22, and they said, given the expense of rarities, do you have a price of a limit per bottle that you're even going to put down anymore? Or is it now, because don't be wrong, I can tell you a story from me in 2014. I had a bottle of Michter's 20 in my hand, and I go to the checkout. I'm not understanding what retail price was on it, and it rings up like $495 or $500. And like
you put it back, didn't you?
My hand was shaking. It was shaking as I. No. It gets better. My hand was shaking. I paid for it. I got out in the car. I sat there and had this moment for like 5 minutes. I'm like, I can't do it. My wife's gonna fucking kill me. And I returned it back to the store. Right. So yeah, that's my biggest bourbon regret. All right. So, but now $500, like I won't even think twice. $1,000, I won't even think twice. Like I'll throw it down in a heartbeat. But is there a price limit of when somebody says something ridiculous that you're not going to pay for
it? To me, there's, I hate to say that there's not, but it just all depends on the particular bottle.
Boss Hog.
$25 max. No, but I think I just bought my most expensive bottle this month I've ever spent. It was I know it's not bourbon, but it was a Kurosawa 35 year, and the retail on it was $6,500, which is insane. But this is one bottle that I want to hold for my retirement, a special bottle that I'll just never let go of. I've always wanted a crazy Kurosawa bottle. It's an unbelievable Japanese whiskey, and so that telling me right there, I guess that's got to be my limit, man. I mean, when you start looking at all these other, what's that 36-year redemption that just came out? How much was that retail?
$1,800 45-year bourbon that tastes like oak and
a piece of wood.
Everybody said it was absolutely horrible. So it's not like to say that you're going to be spending $1,800 wisely, right?
Totally.
Yeah, and I think like when we're talking about bourbon, what's one of the most expensive bottles out there? I think it might be that Michter's Celebration.
Yeah,
just a retail.
Like $6,000.
Yeah.
$6,000. I think the first bottle was $3,000. Then they came out with it again, and it was $6,000, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's pushing it, man. That's really pushing it. And I've had that. It's not good whiskey. I mean, it's good, but it's nothing like Michter's 20, which you get at a quarter of the price.
Yeah,
an eighth of the price.
What about you, Aaron? Where's your upper limit?
I mean, I definitely have limits. Just haven't found them yet.
He's got no limits. Don't believe him.
He's got an Amex Black with $100,000 credit limit.
Yeah. He has no limits. Don't let him fool you.
There's a limit to what I can afford to open. Is there a limit to what I'd buy? I don't know. And that's partially because, number one, if I buy it and I later can't financially keep it, someone will want it at cost. Someone will want it for probably more than cost. There's always an outlet for it. So it's not going to depreciate, right? So that gives you a little peace of mind in what you buy. Is there a limit to what I can buy and open? Yeah, probably more there. We were just at Willett a couple of weeks ago, and the 27-year dropped, and it's $1,200 retail, and it's like we're all swarming, buy as many as we can, right? Like, is that crazy? Probably a little crazy, but for me, like that's what I love, right? So yeah, I don't have a problem buying that, and if I need to sell a couple things to pay for it, sure, I'll do that too, But yeah, I mean, I haven't found the limit yet. But it does keep getting crazier and crazier all the time. And the more crazy stuff you try and the more prices go up, the crazier it all gets. So I'm sure I'll find that limit at some point. I don't buy a ton at retail anymore. There isn't enough availability and not that much stuff that's super interesting at the higher price points to buy. So most of it's, older stuff. Like that old Rip 15 I was talking about, or some of these older Willets, some of those I've paid up for. I have a funny story, Kenny, like yours. One of the stores I frequented early on, the woman who owned it called me one day and said, "I've got this Willet. Would you like it?" It was like $500. It was My Brown Bunny. And at the time I was like, oh, shit, I can't afford this. And this is crazy. But I bought it because I was building a relationship there. And I brought it home and I was like, I got to sell this thing as fast as I can, right? Like, this is crazy. I kept it for like a year and I sold it to Jamie Ferris for like $700 or something like a year later. Now that bottle's like a $3,000 coveted bottle. It happens, right? Like I was freaked out at that point that I spent $500 on that bottle of whiskey. So it's just crazy how like over time the money is become like you care less and less and less, and you want what you want.
Mm-hmm. And I think what allows us to pull the trigger on some of these bottles is kind of knowing that you have the backup plan of, if worst thing comes to worst, I can always get rid of this for what I paid for it. You know, like, so that question would be a good question if we couldn't get rid of it, or if you didn't have a friend down the road that was like knocking your door down, like, hey, can I buy that bottle off you? You know, like, you know, it's knowing the fact that you can get what you got into it and most likely more. You know, that Willet 27 year that just dropped. You know, yeah, it was $1,200. But do I think that this many people would have went out and bought this $1,200 bottle if they knew they couldn't do something with it just in case, you know, afterwards? Probably not, you know. I know I'm not going to go buy, I'm not going to be standing in line at Willet to buy a $1,200 bottle that I'm going to open on the spot and drink, you know. Those days are over for me. I don't think I'm going to buy crazy expensive bottles to drink. I know I just said about the Kirazar retirement bottle, but that's a different one. But really, like the days of standing in line and spending a fortune on bottles that you're going to drink, those days are just over for me, man, I think.
I'll just say this. You know, if Drew from Willet happens to hear this and wants to put out more 27-year-olds at $1,200, I'm there. I'll wait in line, buy them, drink them. I'm good. So,
well, you got it like that then.
Well, it's the game that you got to have somebody else there so you can get two of them, right? That's how it has to work.
I know where I'm coming now that I want to try that. See, so there you go.
You're welcome, man. Up here, we'll open it.
Road trip to Chicago soon. So we'll start kind of rounding this out, because there was another great question by Catch 22, and you know, when you start looking at what you all have been able to try, you know, what's on the horizon, there's going to be no shortage of whiskeys that will be continuing to come out in our lifetime, especially as other quote unquote craft ones are going to start coming out, and we're going to have the shelves are going to just be nonstop stocked for the foreseeable future. However, what's that white whale of yours? Something that you think that maybe you've tried it and you've never been able to find a bottle, or that you have the bottle and you don't know if you could ever bring yourself to ever open it?
You know, I think for me, I think it's pretty easy. It's definitely a Willet of some sort. There's so many old, crazy Willets that are just amazing. Some I have, some I'd love to find. Those for me are still the things that if I'm going to ever spend the money or trade up to and open a very expensive bottle, that's probably it for me. Some of the old Stitzelweller is pretty amazing. I mean, I tried some incredible stuff. Some of the old Van Winkle, the red wax bottlings, you know, the Society of Bourbon Connoisseurs, a couple of those were unbelievable. If I had the wherewithal to go buy those and open them, I would do it tomorrow, because they're just that good. They're some of the best whiskey I've ever had. And they're probably beyond my means at this point. From a retail perspective, I don't know. I don't buy a lot at retail anymore, and I don't see a lot coming out that intrigues me the same way as the older stuff does. I know we're talking bourbon, but I've been drinking a lot of rum, honestly. Kind of like what MSP said, like my palate has been kind of going a different direction. I still love bourbon. I'm drinking bourbon right now. That's what I drink most of the time, but I've been getting a lot into rum. So, you know, you never know. I mean, your palate changes so much. And I drank all this high proof whiskey, went to Japan, started drinking more in the 100, 110 proof range, and feeling like that was my sweet spot. So ask me again in 6 months and it might change. You know, it just, you know.
Absolutely.
My white whale, and always will be, I think, it's going to be an old Stitzelweller, because that's what I really love. You know, Stitzelweller is really hit and miss, though. That's the only problem. You can have two of the exact same bottle. One bottle be life-changing, the best thing you've ever had in your entire life, and then the next one, you know, you go stock up on it. The next one is like very meh. So, you know, I think my real white whale would probably have to be that 121 proof Black Hawk 21 year, right? That's you know about that bottle because you live in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
Now I had a lead on one of those. I almost had that bottle. I was this close, and I don't know who the hell ended up getting it, but I have an idea though. This was years ago. But that is my ultimate bottle that I will most likely never own. It's just impossible to get.
Right. How many were there total?
I think they went to the team and the team when they won the Stanley Cup, I believe they were made for like the executives of the team and the players. And I think they probably ended up probably spraying them in the locker room. Who knows what the hell happened with those, but man, that's one bottle I would love to have. I know there's like 2 or 3 of them floating around, but I don't think they're moving anytime in the near future unless you got some serious cash.
Yeah, big time.
Right. All right. So we'll wrap this up. I guess let's get one more piece of advice that you can give for people on transforming their bunkers. He's already said, sell all your pappy. It's not worth it. At least
don't fall into the hype.
Don't fall in the hype.
Don't fall into the hype and take advantage of your blind tastings. Have your buddies set you up a blind tasting to figure out what you actually like. Labels have a lot of pull when it comes to enjoying a whiskey. Like, you go taste that same whiskey blind and you're not going to like it as much just because, there's not a guy smoking a cigar on the label. It's just don't fall into the hype like I did. I mean, we all have fallen into the hype, but we've gotten past that. I'll be the first one to admit I fell into a lot of hype for sure. I still hype things from here, here and there, but when it comes down to it, I've really honed in at what certain things that I like, and there's no real, it's a wide variety of things. Like I said earlier, Four Roses, Old Stitzel Weller, Old Granddad, Willet. Yeah, I like everything. It's just don't fall into the hype. That's my advice.
Yeah.
What about you, Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. You try things and find out what you really like and what really does it for you before you go spend big bucks, because nowadays everything is expensive. So don't just chase it all. Buy the stuff you've tried. But my best advice, whatever you're drinking, you're going to love it the most if you're drinking it with people that you enjoy drinking it with. That's what whiskey is really all about. That's what this has done for me more than anything else, is opened up this amazing community, and we're all blessed to do it. That's why we're here today to talk about it. So drink what you like and drink it with people you like.
And you heard it from Aaron before. You don't have to buy 10 of them. It's not necessary, right?
Nope. Just go to Aaron's house. He's got them all already anyway.
Come on over.
Well, awesome, fellas. I want to say thank you again for coming on the show tonight or today, whatever it is, if people are listening.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This was fun.
It was definitely a fun conversation. And I know that most people that have seen your names, it's going to be on Facebook. But if there's any way that if you guys are on Twitter or any other kind of like public social things that people want to just follow you or get in contact with you, how would they do that?
Facebook for me, for sure. Easiest way. That's where I spend my time.
Yeah. Facebook and Instagram for me. My Instagram is MikeDog14, and then Michael St. Pierre's the Facebook, obviously, but no trolls though. No trolls. No trolls allowed.
No trolls in whiskey, Mike. You're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. We're not going to get any crap for this. I can already see it. We're going to get zero crap for this.
Send them a direct message with the keyword Bourbon Pursuit, and they send everybody 5 free samples blind. So there you go.
Yeah. Oh God. Oh hell.
I'm just kidding. But honestly, fellas, thank you again for coming on tonight. Make sure you definitely subscribe to Mike on Instagram. You can also find us on Instagram as well as Facebook and Twitter at Bourbon Pursuit. If you do like what you hear, make sure you support the show on Patreon. patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. Make sure you subscribe for our email list. You can just go to bourbonpursuit.com, scroll down. There's going to be a little button with an email. You can get all new episodes beamed straight to your inbox. And if you have any other show suggestions, people would you like to hear from, any other kind of cool topics, this is something that's really fun. Maybe we should probably find some more people within the bourbon community to come around and just talk about bourbon for a little bit. It's been a good conversation, just a simple topic. And we took a few left and right turns, but, we all kind of came full circle at the end. So with that, I want to say thank you, fellas, for coming on. Oh, by the way, if you have other show suggestions, or hate mail or fan mail, whatever it is, the duo, THEDUO @bourbonpursuit.com. And with that, thanks again, fellas, and we'll see you all next week.